Good morning. I am thinking about unfair, dumb practices in graphic design business while listening to Slint, and I'm on my way to my contract job. Let's see. So there is a bunch of stuff that I have dumbly agreed to or not signed contracts that would allow me to get out of agreeing to these things that were probably standard. They were definitely standard practices for the businesses I was dealing with, and I have a feeling they were standard practices for certain industries. These things being standard practices means that other designers have agreed to them, and I'm sure this is still a thing. It was definitely a thing a few years ago. There was a big no spec work movement, which I still think is a really good idea. And I am almost more okay with doing free work than with doing dumb stuff that is unfair in terms of how it's kind of weighted towards you. So let me give some examples instead of ranting. Some years ago, I designed some books and the fees were already too low. But at the stage in my career I was at, I agreed to them because they were connected to things that seemed like really great opportunities. So for example, we made a book called New Skateboard Graphics. And the fee for that was way too low. I'm not going to share what it is, but it was too low. But it was tied in with another opportunity, which is I was writing new skateboard graphics. So I didn't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, as they say. In addition, I don't think I had designed any books. So I really wanted to design some books. So to me, this was like this great opportunity. But the fact that I wholeheartedly agreed to everything without pushing back at all just shows that I was actually really insecure. I still haven't got to these unfair practices, but I will point this out. If I'd had a design process, like a real process, not the vague ambiguity of researching but not knowing what researching means, ideation but not knowing fully what that means, essentially the normal mode of do some stuff and then hopefully you get lucky and you have an idea. If I was past that, I wouldn't have needed to agree to unfair terms because I would have had a method that would have allowed me to design my own books. But the truth is that without a really concrete process, it was really difficult to do my own projects. So that's just a caveat. Like, if the only way you can get a portfolio piece is by doing a real project for someone, to me, that's actually good. That's a sign that your process is lacking still, because it only works when there's this unknown outside of you. So that's an aside. Let's get into this unfair stuff. What I realized through the course of doing 2 books with one publisher, 1 book with another publisher, and something with yet another, was that the fees were directly tied into the first pressing of the book. So you could break down the math based on if you knew how many copies they planned on printing, you knew what they were going to do. So fine, that's their prerogative. But you looked at it and you realized that it was just, what they were paying you was essentially a royalty for per book printed. This is important. New Skateboard Graphics goes to print in a certain run. Within 3 weeks, as they announce it's going to be reprinted. If they had sold through all of those books, I would have gotten a royalty as the author. But I didn't. There were 2 problems. One was that I think that if you're going to print a run of books and you had paid me an advance on 1 set, if you're going to reprint it, you should send me another check as an advance. But my contract didn't promise me that. 2, everyone else involved in this book makes more money off it being printed a second time, except for the designer. And I would argue, like in a book like that, the first most important thing is the content. Like, what are the images in this book? And the second most important thing is the framework that held them. So I would argue that me as a designer was more important than me as the author, but me as the author would have gotten more money if they had sold through that run of books without going bankrupt. Or me as an author would have gotten more money, but me as a designer wouldn't have. So essentially, the cost of reprinting that book, which had already gone down, got to go down another chunk because my contribution, my intellectual property in designing that book was a one-time thing. That to me is deeply unfair. Here's a great example. Like the Walker Art Center made a really beautiful Frida Kahlo book in the thousands, like in the 2000s, the aughts. There are no shortage of Frida Kahlo books. The reason that you're gonna buy the Walker Frida Kahlo book, it might be, if you're a certain person, you might buy it for the authors. That's a possibility. But you're gonna buy the Walker's Frida Kahlo book because the design made it the better quality book than the chintzy mass market books. That's the end of the story. If that had been like a freelance project, that designer would never have seen another dime from that project, despite, and this isn't me calling out the Walker, obviously, this is standard procedure in publishing, despite the fact that the main reason to buy that book is the design. So that's an unfair thing. And my fees were too low, and I agreed to them because I was insecure. Unfair situation number 2. You get an opportunity to work with brands in the skateboard industry, which I'm excited about as a lifelong skateboarder and as a guy who, as you know, just made a book called New Skateboard Graphics. The way that it worked, and again, I'm pretty sure that I can tell this is standard because it worked this way from company to company, is they'd have some kind of art manager and they'd come up with a brief for the next season. So this is like for apparel. And they'd send it out to a bunch of designers. And those designers, the idea was you would do a bunch of spec work. Like you would design a bunch of options and then they'd pick the stuff they want and buy it off you. That situation is obviously messed up for so many reasons. Because one, it disincentivizes you from working hard because there's no guarantee you're getting paid for any of the work. 2, they're not going to send you samples or anything. So all you get is whatever meager cash you get from the situation. But that happens. Oh, and if they would ask you for revisions and then still not buy the art off you. Now, on top of that, the amount of money they wanted to pay for the art was bullshit. It was like, again, I'm not going to say a number, but it would pay for under 5 hours of my time. And if you think about just how long it takes to get something production ready to send to someone, that's 3 to 4 hours, right? So you're not getting paid. You're not getting a credit 9 times out of 10 anywhere. And the thing is going to be so heavily on brand that it's not like it's an exposure thing for you, right? It's not like an artist series. So fine. They take something. They take a shirt. You have designed one shirt for them to get one amount of money with this very bullshit contract that's basically a release of ownership. Then you see the catalog and your design is used on 1, 2, 3, 4 colorways of a shirt and then 2 colorways of a hoodie. As far as I'm concerned, doesn't that sound like at the very least 2 deliverables, the t-shirt and the hoodie, if not 6 deliverables? So the little bit they got from you, they can spread out amongst a bunch of product because they liked your thing so much that it is worth printing a bunch of product. And the contract that you signed was product agnostic. It was basically a one-time fee to buy you out of your rights. This is a terrible, terrible, unfair situation. And you know, like, I don't know how, I should ask how other industries work. Like, I don't know how the music industry works. I'm guessing that when you design the packaging for an unexpected hit that blows up and gets reprinted again and again and used again and again, I'm guessing you don't see more money from that, but you should. Those are 2 really unfair things. And the things that I want to point out are this. In all of that stuff, I was working for experience, exposures, and connects. Doing one book at a bullshit fee, okay, fine. Like, one book at a bullshit fee, that would be worth it to have a book in your portfolio maybe that's like a real printed book for a real client. But doing 4 or 5 of them, 4 of them was just stupid. Like, the situation never got better and I lost money doing that because books are time consuming. No person ever came up to me and sent me an email or something or made a phone call and said, hey, I saw new skateboard graphics. Do you want to design books for us? Because in general, that's not the way the world works. Everybody goes to the people that they already work with, unless you design something that is such an unbelievable breakout hit. So the book is only a marketing tool if I use it as a marketing tool. But in general, nobody is knocking down your door to design a book because there's 40 million book designers in the world. It's really not worth designing books for exposure. One, fine, because you get experience and it's great. But after that, stupid move. Two, I never really got the hookup on the other stuff either, like the skateboard stuff. You work with the one person at the company that knows you. You have no contact with anybody else. You don't even know if the people who are writing the check for the thing know truly who did it, or if they just looked at like sheets of paper with graphics on them and were like, let's take that one, let's take that one, let's take that one. A lot of stuff that you do for exposure is really massive bullshit unless that stuff is actually produced by you and you get it seen by people. But if there's a middleman, in general, I would argue there's no exposure. And if there's no client reviews, there's no exposure because you're not connecting with anyone else there. So let's be very clear here. These are dumb things that I agreed to. But there are also things that tons of other people agreed to. And it cost them money. And it costs everybody else that works with those same companies money. And again, like, you're not getting exposure. Unless those companies are advertising that you made the thing. But then, if you made the thing and they were advertising it, they'd want to pay you more anyway because they're now advertising that you made it. So it's this lose-lose situation. Do like one thing for super cheap for the experience, but after that, have boundaries. And this is a huge mistake that a lot of people make. So those are some industry standard practices that suck. I'm sure that you've got some as well. And when you agree to them, you devalue yourself as a human being and as a professional because you've decided that everybody else in the situation deserves to get paid except for you. All right, thanks for watching.